Hi, I'm Jesse Waters, in for Bill O'Reilly. Thanks for watching this special edition of the O'Reilly Factor, the Trump Agenda. Let's get right to our top story. Democrats' attempts to sabotage President Trump's agenda. Attorney General Jeff Sessions is under mounting fire from the left after the disclosure that he met twice with Russia's ambassador to the United States during the presidential campaign last year. Some conservatives are seeing more sinister motivations behind Democrats' outrage.
This story is not about Jeff Sessions. This story is not about illegal talks between Trump and his campaign people and the Russians. This story is Barack Obama and the Democrat Party attempting to sabotage the Trump presidency and do everything they can to either render it meaningless and ineffective or to get him impeached or force him to resign.
Joining us now with reaction from Austin, Texas, Karl Rove, former senior advisor to President George W. Bush. So, Karl, gauge this for us here. It's either a bunch of low-life leakers doing what they usually do, leaking stuff to the press, or there you have this theory where former President Obama is holed up somewhere and orchestrating this very devious, counter-espionage campaign and laying landmines throughout the administration trying to derail President Trump. How do you see it?
Well, look, I think there is a media bias in the selection of their stories. I do think the Democrats are on high, they're on high alert, looking for every opportunity to trash a member of the Trump administration. Jeff Sessions, I know him personally. I've known him for years. He's a man of great integrity. He did the right thing by recusing himself. He would have done that anyway because that's the kind of person he is. But what they're attacking him for is a nothing burger. And does President Obama have a direct role in this? Well, I don't know. Maybe he's busy negotiating that $60 million book deal. But I do know this. He has an organization called Organizing for America. It used to be called Obama for America. He started it. He organized it. He funded it. He put the people in charge. And I get their truth team emails, which they send out on a regular basis. And it's all designed to stir people up. Here's one. Trump administration sets stage for mass deportations, they say. Well, I actually read the story, which was from CNN, and it doesn't say that, but that's what the headline is that they wrote for it. Here's another one. Unhappy with Trump? Call your congressman. Local delegation fielding record number of calls. I mean, they are systematically attempting. It's really remarkable. The political organization of the former president never missed a beat. On January 21st, they were out there attacking President Obama's successor, President Trump, and have continued at it. I don't think we have seen this in maybe ever in American history that a president, having left office, has his political apparatus going tooth and nail after his successor.
You could not resist holding up a white piece of paper, could you?
I couldn't help it. I mean, I'll do it again if you like.
You can't do one segment without it. I know.
Here's a third one. Here's a third one.
It's okay. It's okay. We believe you. Now, I've been reading some information in The Guardian and the National Journal, which said that the Obama administration actually sought and at one point received wiretap approval to listen to the phone calls of Trump officials as late as October. And then when you combine that with this New York Times report that Obama officials are disseminating information about Russia throughout various agencies in the government that will be used during the transition and then uncorked during the first 100 days, it seems like a systematic strategy to take down President Trump. Pretty devious, wouldn't you say?
Well, let's divide these. Let's take the second one first. The reports that the Obama administration officials took information about the contacts between Trump campaign supporters or Trump campaign officials and Russians and disseminated it throughout the government in order that the Trump administration would not be able to suppress this information strikes me as paranoia. These are a bunch of over-the-top lunatics who are sitting there saying, oh, we so distrust our successor that if he found information that was damaging to America's security interests and that might reflect badly on somebody associated with his campaign, campaign, he would bury it. Well, that says something about how they view the current president of the United States.
It sure does.
Inappropriate, but paranoid. The first one, let me, though, say is something different. I have a general sense that the FBI, particularly when they go to get what's called a FISA, that is to say a national security warrant to tape conversations and to intercept conversations, I have a sense that they're acting on the basis of need, and that the judges who grant those FISA requests would not act without some sense that something needed to be listened to. I divorce that entirely. I don't think that was political at all.
Perhaps.
I don't think so.
Now, let me ask you this, because if this had happened with George W. Bush, and you had former Clinton officials going after, they're going after Kellyanne Conway, they went after Flynn, they're going after Sessions, how should President Trump respond to these attacks on his lieutenants? Because it's happening, and I don't know if there's a strategy to counteract it.
Well, look, I think you have to do it almost on a case-by-case basis, but I think tone is important. First of all, don't be diverted. This is an attempt to divert the president's energy and effort to get him engaged in conversation about Kellyanne Conway on the couch or Jeff Sessions recusing himself. Don't take the bait. Keep focused on the big things. Cutting taxes in order to energize the American economy. Rolling back unnecessary regulations in order to free up the energy of American job creators and prosperity creators. And get rid of repeal and replace Obamacare. These were the big things that people elected him to. So the first and most important thing is don't take the bait. And second is tone. And the tone ought to be not anger. The tone ought to be disappointment. Because most Americans look at this stuff and say that's petty politics. And the more that the administration says, you know what, we're so sorry that some of our political opponents feel obligated to do this. We're focused on the bigger things that America's concerned about. That's the way to go.
President Trump showed that the joint session that he can rise above party politics, so we'll see if he can do it with these leaks. Thank you very much, Carl. I appreciate it.
Congratulations, incidentally, on your coup. I wonder where you stashed O'Reilly, and
we can't tell
we'll ever
anybody.
See him again.
It was a bloodless coup, and he's on an island somewhere in the South Pacific.
I think it's the South Atlantic.
Congressional Democrats in a feeding frenzy over the Jeff Sessions controversy, demanding his resignation. One Democratic congressman joins us in the no spin zone with reaction straight ahead. In the Impact segment tonight, Democrats calling for the resignation of Jeff Sessions. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer is leading the attack against the Attorney General, saying this yesterday.
Because the Department of Justice should be above reproach for the good of the country, Attorney General Sessions should resign.
But Schumer had a very different reaction after then Attorney General Loretta Lynch had her highly criticized tarmac meeting with President Bill Clinton during the Hillary Clinton email investigation last year.
She has said nothing was discussed related to the investigation. So you have two choices, to say this didn't matter or she's lying. I think it didn't matter. I don't think she's lying.
Joining us now with a reaction, Democratic New York Congressman Tom Suozzi. You are my congressman. So I have to put you on the spot here. Your fellow New Yorker.
Did you vote for me or not?
I did not.
As long as that's clear from the get-go.
I did not. I'm not afraid to say it. But your colleague, former New York guy, he says one thing about Loretta Lynch, takes her at her word, but then does not take his also former colleague in the Senate, Jeff Sessions, at his word. A little hypocritical, wouldn't you say, Congressman?
No, I wouldn't say that.
How could you not say that? Come on.
I think they could be distinguished, but you know what? That's not my focus here. I'm here to talk about the problem solvers.
Well, it's my focus. So you're going to dodge?
That.
You're going to dodge?
But it's not a dodge. I don't think it's hypocritical. I think there's a distinction between the two.
Yeah.
There wasn't a case of a question of whether or not Jeff Sessions purges himself or Loretta Lynch perjures herself.
Mm-hmm. Well,
so it's a very different situation, and it didn't involve national security and the Russians and things like that.
Well, Hillary's server involved national security.
Anyway, let's talk about how to make America a better place.
Okay, that's fine. I'll let you slide because you are my congressman. I'm terrified of you. You're in the problem-solving caucus in Congress.
Problem solvers caucus.
Right, which is an oxymoron, in my opinion. Where do you see common ground with President Trump? On what items?
Well, let me first tell you that there are 20 Democrats and 20 Republicans of the U.S. Congress that are on the Problem Solvers Caucus. And our goal is to try and find common ground to try and actually get things done, because everybody's sick of Congress and they don't get things done.
I agree with that.
And so they want us to try and accomplish things.
Can you get along about Obamacare? Can you help out with that? Because you know that's unraveling right now.
We need to see what the proposal is from the Republicans. They haven't shown it to us yet. They haven't shown anybody it yet.
Right, no one's seen it. They won't even show fellow Republicans.
Secret. It's a secret.
It's a top secret.
But right now, we've sent a letter to the president saying we want to talk about tax reform and about infrastructure. And we think that those are two big areas where there could be places that we could talk about common ground.
So tax reform, we're going to get the top rate down. We're going to get the business rate down. We're also going to get middle class taxes cut. You have to agree that taxes are too high. I mean, we're both living in the same area. You know, we're paying half of our paycheck
to the feds. Well, your big problem is property taxes on Long Island. That's the big, huge problem.
But besides that, you know, we have state taxes and we have federal taxes. But the federal taxes, you know, 39%, 36%, those got to come down, right?
The bottom line is that I really agree that it's clear as day that we need to lower the corporate tax.
Okay.
We need to try and bring that money that's offshore back into the United States of America, and I'd like to see that invested in infrastructure, a massive infrastructure program.
What about income taxes?
As far as income taxes, I said throughout my campaign, I'm opposed to any increase in the income tax because
that's not happening.
Because our district especially, but all of New York State, is a huge net donor to the federal government. We send a lot more to the federal government than we get back. And I encourage my Democratic colleagues from Democratic states like New York and New Jersey and Connecticut and California. We're all huge net donors.
Right.
To the
especially Bill O'Reilly, also a New Yorker.
Also went to Chaminade High School.
I know, giving a lot of the money.
I want you to know he voted for me when I was
to the Treasury.
Executive.
Well, that makes one of us then.
Well, you were in Suffolk County. You couldn't vote for me in
That's
Suffolk County.
Infrastructure. Okay, this is going to be about $1 trillion bill. We need new roads. We need new bridges. The LIE, Long Island Expressway, disaster. It takes me about an hour and a half to get into the city for about 30 miles.
Well,
Can we get something done there?
You should be taking mass transit.
I
Jesse.
do. I take the train, but sometimes I have to drive.
Now, the bottom line is that, you know, there's everybody agrees there's a massive deficit in infrastructure investment in the United States of America. And it's not just roads. It's also mass transit. It's also sewers. It's also water. It's also airports. And it'll create a lot of middle-class jobs that we need, and it'll create a lot of economic activity.
Well, as long as you can get your friend Nancy Pelosi on board with some of these moderate proposals, I think we might have a deal here. What do you say? Can you bring Nancy along?
I think that Nancy Pelosi and other Democrats are very interested in creating jobs in the United States of America.
Okay, then why did she sit and not clap when Trump announced all those new jobs at the State of the Union?
I think that, you know, it was really
She was tired. She was tired.
It was really interesting to watch the clapping and not clapping throughout the whole thing.
Yeah, mostly the not clapping. Congressman, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Coming up next on the special edition of the O'Reilly Factor, Democrats claim Jeff Sessions may have violated the law. But are their claims wildly over-exaggerated? Right back with it. In the Unresolved Problems segment tonight, Democrats demanding a legal investigation of Jeff Sessions. Some of them claim the Attorney General committed perjury during his Senate confirmation hearings last month. But are those accusations completely overblown? Joining us now from Washington to analyze, George Washington University law professor Jonathan Turley. So, Professor, does Sessions face any sort of perjury charge, yes or no?
No. I don't even think this is a close case. He was asked a fairly convoluted and extended question that dealt with a recent media release about campaign involvement with the Russians. He answered that question. He went beyond what the question asked him, which was what he would do about it. And then he answered that question, and then he went beyond it to say, and I haven't had any contacts with the Russians. It was inartful. I mean, it turns out that he has had contacts with Russians. He should have corrected it, but that's not perjury. And the standard for perjury is quite high. You have to show intent. There's only been a handful of people who have been prosecuted in the last 6 decades for perjury and other related issues in Congress, because the standard is quite difficult to meet.
Right. And the next step seems to be a special prosecutor. I keep on hearing about a special prosecutor. I think Democrats want a special prosecutor. What would that mean, and why would there be a special prosecutor? To do what?
Well, you see, the odd thing about that is if you ask for a special counsel to be selected and the acting deputy attorney general could order that if they view this as a conflict for the department to handle the question, you still have to articulate what it is that they're investigating.
Yeah, I mean, what is the investigation? Is it about Russian interference with the election and then being in cahoots with the Trump campaign? Is that what they're getting after?
Yeah, see, the problem is that we don't have any evidence of collusion. But even if you go to say that maybe there was collusion, the question is, what's the crime? It's not a Logan Act violation of interfering with foreign relations. We haven't seen any type of allegation with regard to that since the Flynn episode, and he wasn't even charged under that.
Right.
We haven't had any allegations of money being exchanged from the Russians. And so the question is, what is the special counsel going to investigate?
Right.
Is he going to come in and say, yep, we were hacked by the Russians,
right,
much like we've hacked other countries?
Yeah.
Is he going to investigate some nameless guy in St. Petersburg? You usually have to articulate some type of criminal act, and that hasn't happened yet. Now, maybe evidence will come forward,
right,
but until it does, you're getting ahead of your skis on this.
It seems to me that the only problems the Trump administration is having is not the contacts with the Russians, it's what they say about said contacts. Is that how you see it?
I think that's right.
If there's nothing else besides that, then this thing dies.
Well, that is a problem. The White House has not exactly been performing as well as it should. It's been sort of 3 beats behind. For example, in the Sessions case, there should have been a clarifying letter that was sent, and this would have been a total non-issue. He should have recused himself. Quite frankly, I don't understand why a recusal wasn't readily embraced early on. It's a really good deal. You can pull out your critical people out of this investigation, which is likely to go nowhere. They can focus on other things, and you won't have the drip, drip, drip of this type of controversy. So I don't know why this wasn't recognized early on. The White House and said, we're totally cool with an investigation. We're going to have a lot of people recuse themselves, and you can take this as far as you want to go.
Well, if Sessions' staff was as competent as the Factor staff, they definitely would have let him know that this thing was hanging out there, and we wouldn't have had this problem. All right, Professor Thurley, thank you very much. In the Factor follow-up segment tonight, government leaks and the media. On Tucker Carlson's show last night, Attorney General Jeff Sessions blasted the constant flow of leaks that are undermining the Trump administration.
We are having a lot of leaks today in Washington that I do believe are troubling. A lot of it would appear to be in violation of the law, and it's an unhealthy trend, and we've got to do better about it. I do believe every department needs to take a greater interest in maintaining proper security.
Despite concerns that these leaks may be breaking laws, many in the mainstream media are unfazed.
We're getting great print coverage by the hour, and that's the only reason this administration is admitting things. Trump didn't act on Flynn until it was exposed by the press. The Attorney General didn't recuse himself till today because the report ran in today's newspapers. This is an administration being driven by truth that's coming from somewhere else.
Joining us now with a reaction from Washington, journalist and author Ronald Kessler, whose newest book is The First Family Detail, now in paperback, and Democratic strategist Richard Goodstein. So is the press doing its job, Ron, or is it aiding and abetting illegal leakers? What do you think?
Well, these revelations are not that big a deal. You know, whether Flynn lied was not a surprise to the White House. They already knew that he had lied previously. And this does compromise national security very seriously, because who wants to cooperate with the CIA and become an asset and reveal, for example, terrorist plots that could wipe out millions of people with WMD attacks if they feel that their secrets will not be kept confidential. You have a press that's totally out of control. AP ran a story about the fact that the CIA had an asset in Yemen who was revealing information about bombs that would be put on planes going to the United States that could not be detected normally. There was no abuse. There was no failure. The CIA was doing its job, and yet AP ran this story, and of course that meant that the asset was gone, compromised. That could have resulted in many deaths.
Yeah.
So you really have a press that's out of control and arrogant.
They definitely are arrogant, I will give you that. Richard, I just remember the last 8 years, there weren't that many exclusives and that many just revelations coming out of the press, not a lot of investigations. Now, just in the course of 3 months, it's like every single day there's this front page splash, breaking news in the print media, you know, constant breaking news, revelations, investigations. They're getting all this stuff from somewhere. These leakers are just running wild, and the press is loving it.
Yeah. Well, a couple things, Jesse. First, there were leaks during the Trump campaign, hardly the doing of Obama holdovers. Second, the stench of hypocrisy is just a little strong here, considering Donald Trump 100 times on the campaign trail extolled the virtues of WikiLeaks. He said, I love WikiLeaks. So somehow, now that his goose is getting cooked, you know, it looks a bit different. And third, I think what's going on here is, look, Trump has whopper after whopper, whether it's the Electoral College margin or the murder rates or whatnot. It's one after another. And I think people in the administration don't know that the truth will actually come out. They see that the truth is kind of Trump's enemy, and that people working for Trump see, well, it works for him to say things that aren't true. Maybe it'll work for me too.
Well, the difference between the WikiLeaks revelations, that was just John Podesta talking trash and embarrassing details about Chelsea. These leaks involve national security and taped conversations between your national security advisor and other people, or conversations President Trump is having with the leaders of Mexico and Australia. A little bit different.
Yeah, here's how it's the same. 17 intelligence agencies said the Russians, using WikiLeaks, among other things, were trying to subvert the U.S. elections. That's pretty serious. And if it turns out, we don't know the facts yet, that if any of Paul Manafort, Roger Stone, Carter Page, Michael Flynn were talking with the Russians, and incidentally, it was not just a coincidence that the WikiLeaks dropped an hour after the Access Hollywood tape came out. If any of that turns out to be true, and I'll stipulate, we don't know that yet, that's treason.
Well, Hillary lost the election because she was a terrible candidate. It didn't have anything to do with the Russians.
Winning 3 million more votes.
You know, on top of this,
Ronald, please respond to Richard.
On top of this, Eric Holder, when he was Attorney General, made it much more difficult for the FBI to uncover the sources of these leaks. On the one hand, you know, this is very sensitive information, so it's very compartmented. But Eric Holder imposed these rules, making it extremely difficult for the FBI. First of all, if they go after a press organization to get contacts, they have to notify them beforehand so they can challenge it in court. And secondly, they can't issue a search warrant against a reporter unless the reporter is actually under criminal investigation. So really, Holder tied the hands of the FBI, not based on anything in the Constitution, not based on any law passed by Congress, and that's going to make it much more difficult.
Yeah,
I'll tell you, I was on the Washington Post during Watergate under Ben Bradley, and there's no way that he would have run any of these stories.
And President Obama went after leakers harder than any other president in modern day history. And now all of a sudden there's leaks out of the Trump White House, and Trump wants to plug the leaks, and Trump is this bad guy that's trying to destroy the First Amendment and whistleblower. So when the President Obama goes after people, it's leakers, and then when Trump goes after people, it's whistleblowers.
But Obama
you don't
didn't
see the
say
hypocrisy
that the press
there?
is the enemy of the people, Jesse. Obama didn't say that. Trump has.
Fake news is the enemy of the people, not the press. There's a distinction to that, Richard.
Well, he said both. He actually initially said it was the media that was the enemy of the people, and then he said fake news, and we don't really know what he means by that. Look, the fact is, it's statements
I know
like
what he means. He means this fake dossier that claimed he was doing God knows what in a hotel room in Russia that he never went to. But guys, I got to run. Gentlemen, thank you very much. Thanks for staying with us for this special edition of the O'Reilly Factor, The Trump Agenda. I'm Jesse Waters, in for Bill O'Reilly. And in the personal story segment tonight, going after criminal illegal immigrants. Amid the Trump administration's crackdown, authorities in New York State have indicted members of the brutal Central American gang MS-13 on murder charges. The 13 gang members were charged in the murders of 7 people, including the savage deaths of 2 high school girls last year. It is worth repeating, 10 of the 13 gang members are here illegally. Joining us now from San Diego Reaction, Enrique Morones, founder of the immigration advocacy group Border Angels. And from Washington, Bob Dane, executive director of the Federation for American Immigration Reform. So details of this case out in Long Island, where I live, Enrique, pretty vicious. Beat these people up with baseball bats, machetes. I mean, really sickening stuff. Enrique, you would agree that getting rid of criminal, illegal, alien gang members in the United States protects public safety. Would you cede that?
I believe, and I'm sure the entire country believes, that criminal people, whether they're documented or not, should be behind bars. If they're from another country, they should be deported. Everybody agrees with that. There's no doubt about that. The only person that does not agree is maybe the criminal.
Okay, good. So where do you draw the line? Because some people say you have to commit a rape or a murder or some really heinous felony. What about a DUI? If an illegal immigrant is here and they're busted for a DUI, they should go, right?
Well, first of all, I don't call them illegal immigrants. They're undocumented people.
It's the
people
same
that
thing,
don't have
Enrique.
papers that are, the terminology is not the same. I mean, I know you like to use that hate rhetoric, and a lot
It's
of
not hateful.
people in your camp do.
It's not
well,
hateful.
It is well, the majority of the country does not agree, but that's apparently
I would
does not matter
tend to
Fox.
disagree with that, but that's besides the
well,
point.
That's okay. That's Fox News. But let me answer
and you're
your
on
question.
Fox News, so we'll
I
call
know,
it how
yeah,
we
that's
see
right.
it.
Yeah, you can call it how you see it, and I'll call it how I and the majority of the country will see it.
That's fine.
So
Call it whatever you
if a
want.
person is undocumented and they break the law, they should be punished according to the law. I don't think anybody disagrees with that. But the thing is that the people that create the most of these hateful crimes or drunk driving are actually citizens by a much larger percentage when you do it per capita. So the thing is that when somebody is undocumented and they're caught for drunk driving or they've done something terrible, they should be punished. That should happen whether they're documented or not.
Okay.
But to try to paint it as if undocumented people are doing it a lot more than everybody else.
I'm not
that's just
saying
not
they
true.
are. I'm not saying they are, but this is a vicious crime in my neck of the woods involving gang members and machetes. I think it needs to be addressed. Mr. Dane,
I do too.
The knock against the Trump immigration crackdown is that they're now going after immigrants that came here illegally but haven't broken the law since. Do you think it's fair to go after those people and deport them?
Look, I think I think one of the most diabolical legacies of the Obama administration is to have attempted to reprogram the way that America thinks about immigration. In other words, we're supposed to think that violating immigration laws in and of themselves is now entirely inconsequential unless you happen to be a convicted felon or represent a national security threat. But the fact of the matter is we do have laws on the books. And in terms of this surge of gang violence, these are bad guys and they mean business. But this gang violence is really a symptom of a broader issue. We've had 8 long years of a lack of enforcement at every level of government in terms of immigration, and we've had increasing numbers of sanctuary cities where they are aiding and abetting, harboring illegal immigration. So now, after 8 years, you've got massive illegal immigration. You've got these huge holes that the drug cartels, the human traffickers, and other criminal enterprises are exploiting, and people are dying as a result of that. Look,
yeah, Enrique, let's let Enrique address that, because you do have these sanctuary cities, and they act as a magnet for criminal illegal alien activity. If you shut those sanctuary cities down, wouldn't that in turn at least reduce the criminal illegal alien activity in those cities?
No, because there's never been an increase in people that are undocumented, increasing in crime. Remember your source that you're using.
Well, wait a second. No. Enrique, in a lot of these sanctuary cities, there are high levels of illegal alien criminality. You'd have to agree with that.
No, I don't agree with it.
Yes, you have to. That's what the stats show.
It's not true. You're using FAIR as a reference. Come on, they were funded by the Pioneer Fund.
I'm not.
They believe in eugenics, white supremacy.
Okay, listen,
that's crazy.
I'm not using their statistics. Just look at San Francisco.
Who's your source?
Just look at San Francisco.
Yeah,
the FBI. The FBI says in these sanctuary cities there is a higher rate of criminal illegal alien activity. And wait, if you're going to go to like cities that don't allow sanctuary policies to exist, you're going to say that there's more? I mean, it doesn't make any sense, Enrique. You're having
a problem with this because that's not what the FBI says. Law enforcement says that documented people are much higher percentage to be criminals and to do criminal activities.
Okay, I listen. Look, Americans commit crimes too, but when they're in jail, they stay in jail and don't get deported. The point is, if you're an illegal alien, you commit a crime, you gotta go, right?
You should be in jail, and if an undocumented person that commits a crime, without a doubt, should be punished.
And then they should be deported, correct?
Is the criminal. Well, if they qualify for deportation, remember they have no legal way of entering the country. Most of these people, the people that are here that are undocumented, have no legal way of entering the country. It's not like when your forefathers and foremothers came when there was no illegal way.
Oh, come on.
For most of these people, they don't have a legal way.
That's complete nonsense. There's
that's a fact.
Guys, I got to run. A new study reveals just how biased the media has been against President Trump so far. It's almost comical. Right back with it. In the second Unresolved Problem segment tonight, the media's coverage of President Trump. A new study by the Conservative Media Research Center finds that during President Trump's first 30 days in office, a whopping 88% of the evening news coverage on the big three networks. Joining us now with more from Richmond, Virginia, Tim Graham, Director of Media Analysis at the Media Research Center. So Tim, 88%, it's pretty astonishing. I mean, that's almost 100% out of the park. What do you take away from that?
Well, we should explain that it doesn't count partisan sources, which would mean Trump speaking or Chuck Schumer speaking. But yeah, overwhelmingly, those people that you trust, the reporters themselves, sources in the American public, overwhelmingly negative. And the funny thing about it is this is the time in a presidency where the president of whichever party gets some sort of a honeymoon. You know, 8 years ago, we were still on, and the Obama girl's got a dog. You know, and
yeah, I mean,
look at Michelle's arms.
If this is Trump's honeymoon, wait till the rest of the marriage turns out. I mean, I think a divorce is right around the corner. The effect that this has, this constant barrage of just very negative attacks against the president. The American public, are they tuning this coverage out, or are they soaking it in? How do you think they're digesting it?
I think it obviously gives them some sense of unease. I think you saw, you know, when there was like this little pause after his speech to Congress, there was sort of a sense of relief, like, oh, they're not going to slam them today for about 12 hours. But obviously, we found the same thing in the fall, 88% negative coverage in the last weeks of the campaign, and he won. So I think he can govern with this, but I think that still the question is, how do these people suggest this is fair and balanced? I don't think that's the case at all. And you don't have to be 88% hostile to hold the president accountable.
You know, you said something interesting because he did win despite the overwhelmingly negative coverage. I'm wondering if the mainstream media bias almost helps the president because it's so vicious and it's so bad. And then you have these fake news stories that he can point to and say, see, this is what I'm up against. The people and I are running against this hateful media machine. It's us against them. Does that kind of boost his credibility with the rest of the American public?
I think it does. I think that they have this idea, though, that Trump criticizing the liberal media is something he just does for his base, and this can't possibly work with independent voters, people in the middle. I think that's not true. I think it's obviously, again, we saw the results of the election. I think it's actually remarkable, some of the approval ratings we've seen for Trump in his first few weeks. You would expect it to be much worse trying to watch the way the television networks go after him.
Yeah, and you know, I don't even think people believe the approval ratings anymore because they were so wrong in the run-up to the election, and his numbers were supposedly terrible, but he won over 300 electoral votes. So I think everybody just forgets about these polls and these numbers anymore. And, you know, we'll see what happens in the midterm. Tim, thanks very much. I really appreciate it.
Sure.
When we return, how next week is shaping up to be a pivotal one for the Trump administration. Top political reporters are here to tell us what to expect. Right back. In the Back of the Book segment tonight, it's been a roller coaster week for the Trump administration, and next week could prove even more critical. Joining us now from Washington with their perspectives, Bob Cusack, editor-in-chief of The Hill newspaper, along with Aaron McPipe, White House correspondent for the Independent Journal-Review. So Aaron, besides Waters hosting The Factor, what do you think the biggest news of the week this week was?
I think it absolutely has to be the president's joint address to Congress because he rose to the occasion. He was presidential. There was a lot of concern, especially on Capitol Hill and from Republicans, about whether or not he could do that. And in that speech, he reached out to Democrats. He gave a message of unity, and he talked about a number of issues that Democrats actually do care about. That's infrastructure, that's paid family leave, that's the child care tax credit, and he also talked about immigration reform. I think some of those messages were really important, and a lot of Democrats, even Chuck Schumer, were speechless after that.
Making Chuck Schumer speechless is quite an accomplishment. Bob, do you see that, or was the Sessions thing something that carried the week, in your opinion?
Well, Jesse, I mean, I think the Sessions thing certainly a bit overshadowed the speech, but I think history will look back to this week and say the Trump speech, I agree with Aaron, it was a solid speech, very measured, and it really gave the Republicans some much-needed momentum now that they have to do this heavy lifting with their agenda on Obamacare and tax reform. So I think the speech.
Okay. So, Aaron, next week, what do we have to look forward to? It seems like every week there's just some huge story that breaks late. Any surprises?
Well, look, I think what did overshadow this week, what came out about Jeff Sessions and other details in the Russia probe, in that story, tell us that next week will be a huge week for that. We know that Obama officials tried to preserve all of this intelligence about Russian officials meeting with Trump campaign aides. And I think that tells us that so many more details are going to come out next week. So that is going to overshadow anything else. Remember, the travel ban, the new one, was supposed to come out at the end of this week, and it got knocked off. Some big other stories will happen next week, but there is no question in my mind that we will see more details come out about Russia.
Yeah, and maybe we'll find out more Democrats that had lunch with the ambassador. Bob, what is your prediction for next week? Lay it on us.
I think it's Obamacare. Paul Ryan and the White House are putting the finishing touches on a repeal and replace bill. It's going to be very difficult to pass because some conservatives want different things than the White House. So the Republicans have to unify. As you know, Jesse, they're not going to get any help from Democrats on this. So a big moment next week. We could see a bill as early as next week.
Yeah, but the Republicans aren't unifying because you had senators walking out because they weren't even allowed to see the text of this Obamacare repeal bill. Why is the Obamacare repeal bill like the biggest secret in Washington?
Well, it can be controversial.
There's been leaks about everything except the Obamacare bill.
Yeah, no, I think these decisions are so hard on what to do with the taxes and Medicaid expansion is that they're going in one direction and the Freedom Caucus, the conservative Freedom Caucus in the House, wants to go in a different direction, and Ted Cruz. So remember, Republicans don't have a lot of votes that they can lose. So you have to unify or this doesn't happen, Jesse.
All right, so Aaron, you said it's going to be Russia. Bob, you said it's going to be Obamacare. Whoever loses has to buy the other person dinner, okay?
I like it. I like it.
All right, guys, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. And a quick reminder, don't forget to catch my show, Waters World, tomorrow night. It features my confrontation with one of the people disparaging the widow of Navy SEAL Ryan Owens. Here's a sneak peek. I can't even believe that you would denigrate the service and sacrifice of this family by accusing her of being a pawn for the president. You wouldn't say that to her face, would you, John?
Sure. Absolutely.
You would say that to her face. You know what? If you would actually say that to her face, you'd probably get slapped in the face. Waters World airs at 8 p.m. Eastern tomorrow night, right here on the Fox News Channel. Bill O'Reilly loves the show so much, he DVRs it, if he can work the DVR. So we can watch it twice every week, so be sure to check it out. Actually, I think the only time Bill has ever seen Waters World was when he was a guest on Waters World. Bill, if you're watching, I didn't mean that. Also, there is a new Contributing Factor podcast available featuring former Navy SEAL Jocko Willink discussing Trump's national security team, and you can find that on BillO'Reilly.com or on iTunes. And that is it for us tonight. Bill is still in hiding. He is down in some island in the Pacific where we're keeping him. And the coup has been underway. Waters World has taken over the Factor. And you may not ever see Bill again. He might be enjoying the vacation so much, he might never return. I think a lot of people would be happy, especially me. Just kidding, Bill. We love you. Thank you very much for watching this very special edition of the O'Reilly Factor, The Trump Agenda. I'm Jesse Waters, in for Bill O'Reilly, who will be back Monday. I'll be back too. And please remember, I'm Waters, and this is my world. Hi, I'm Jesse Waters, in for Bill O'Reilly. Thanks for watching this special edition of the O'Reilly Factor, The Trump Agenda. Let's get right to our top story. Democrats' attempts to sabotage President Trump's agenda. Attorney General Jeff Sessions is under mounting fire from the left after the disclosure that he met twice with Russia's ambassador to the United States during the presidential campaign last year. Some conservatives are seeing more sinister motivations behind Democrats' outrage.
This story is not about Jeff Sessions. This story is not about illegal talks between Trump and his campaign people and the Russians. This story is Barack Obama and the Democrat Party attempting to sabotage the Trump presidency and do everything they can to either render it meaningless and ineffective or to get him impeached or force him to resign.
Joining us now with reaction from Austin, Texas, Karl Rove, former senior advisor to President George W. Bush. So, Karl, gauge this for us here. It's either a bunch of low-life leakers doing what they usually do, leaking stuff to the press, or there you have this theory where former President Obama is holed up somewhere and orchestrating this very devious, counter-espionage campaign and laying landmines throughout the administration trying to derail President Trump. How do you see it?
Well, look, I think there is a media bias in the selection of their stories. I do think the Democrats are on they're on high alert, looking for every opportunity to trash a member of the Trump administration. Jeff Sessions, I know him personally. I've known him for years. He's a man of great integrity. He did the right thing by recusing himself. He would have done that anyway.